Hello, I'm Gigi Kopelak. Welcome to the show. This year marks the 100th anniversary of the 1913 Armory Show in New York City. It was the show of the decade, or the century, I should say. And here to talk about it is Mark Waller. He is the director of Gallerie Moderne in Piermont. Welcome, Mark. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Gigi.
So you are an expert sort of on this. You're going to be giving a lecture and doing other things with this. I think your gallery is going to have some shows on it.
Yeah, I'm giving a brief talk at the brief presentation at the Hopper House,
which is in Nyack.
in
New
Nyack,
York, yeah.
which is kind of linked with the whole event.
Right, but why is this such a big event?
It was the first time that modern art, all the big names, that were shown to the general public of New York City. 450,000 people went through the show.
Not just the elite.
No, I mean the elite were there.
Because some of the things sold.
Oh yeah, no, they did. They sold some serious works of art.
Right.
Some very historic purchases were made there. But it was the shock of the new. Basically, it was modern art. Picaboo. So many of the big.
Right, but not just Americans.
No. This was it was the international modern movement came to show and was shown in New York for the very first time to the mass public.
Right.
Stieglitz had shown modern art in his 291 gallery, so it had been shown, but not so well known. It was a much smaller event. This was a big event.
But I think the interesting thing was that it was started by American artists.
Oh yeah, no, it was the whole thing was started from when the 8 showed in 1908. They were the rebels against the Academy.
Right.
And
so at the time, when you say the Academy, all the work was very realistic.
Yeah, it was the whole art market was run by a sort of frock-coated mafia.
Okay, okay, that's a cute way to put it.
Yeah, I mean they weren't bankers; they were actually, they were artists, and it was a bit of an old boys' network. And they vetted everything.
And they decided who was going to show.
Yeah, and what the subjects were and all this, and it was a bit stuffy, and it was
So we had these 8 rebels.
Yeah, we had these 8 rebels, which were Glackens,
Sloane, I think, was one of them.
Sloane, Lukes, Davies, Henry, Lawson, Prendergast, Shin.
And their work was realistic, but it was different.
It was realistic in a freer sense. Henry had been such an amazing teacher, and he was a great libertarian. He taught freedom of expression and thought.
Right.
And he was part of the Academy, but he was, definitely on the rebellious side.
Okay.
Marvelous man. And it led on to young artists wanting freedom to show, and it led into the Armory Show.
Right, and so I think the president of these 8 or something.
Henry would have been the natural choice, but he was too busy. I think he wrote that if there were 2 of me, I'd do it. But they elected a guy called A.B. Davies, who had a farm in Rockland County, which is my sort of focus of interest. And they elected him, and he was a quiet, sort of withdrawn man. And I think they thought it was kind of he'd be efficient, but not too.
Right. I love that you say he was a quiet, withdrawn man, because in the end, there's quite a scandal about him.
Yeah, no, he was very contracted. But he was reckoned to be one of the great artists of the epoch.
Right.
He was really reckoned to be one of the top 3.
Right.
But anyway, they elected him, and he turned into this sort of organizational monster.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, thank goodness he did.
Yeah.
But he got it organized. He saw a chance, and he went for it.
And so he went to Europe.
He went to Europe. He sent people all over the place. He packed people off at the docks to show us, to see a show in Germany. I mean, he really travelled. He got to Paris. I mean, he worked like crazy. He pulled all the connections together, and he he produced this thing. I mean, it's a miracle of
well, we have to talk a little bit about the time or the history behind this. Let's just do that first, so that it wasn't just that they wanted to show modernism; they wanted to show a progression.
Yeah, they did show that. I mean, the whole history of kind of modern art. I mean, it starts a long time before that. I mean, after the Great Exhibition of 1859, the Crystal Palace in London, which was organised by Victoria's Albert.
Okay.
Good Germans,
Right.
Belief in engineering.
Okay.
The French turned around and said, goodness gracious, we're behind the game on this. They'd had a sort of very difficult start of the 18th century. No, sorry, 19th century. And they realised that they'd lost the sort of premier position in luxury goods, art. I mean, a lot of the artists were training in Germany and in England and in Holland. Yeah, Paris was not the centre of the art world at that time. And some very bright guys got together, an art critic, a collector, and a couple of psychologists, in actual fact. I mean, they got together and made the government realise that, they had to sort of support the arts because it was fiscally important to the country, and they'd lost it. So they started taking the arts seriously. They formed something that went through many names, but it's basically the Union des Arts Décoratifs. And they promoted art. They promoted artisans. They looked after their artists.
Right.
So when the Impressionists arrived, it was difficult. Their academy was still stuffy.
Same kind of thing that it was here.
But eventually the Impressionists got support. And Paris still had a difficult time. They had the Commune, and that was difficult. But it gradually became accepted, and it started to bloom as the art capital.
So would you say that was the beginning of modern art? Are you saying?
It's the start of modernism in a way, because it's it's engineering and science, art all mixing together and creating free thought and a progression in the arts. It's progressive.
Okay.
So it started to bloom. By 1889, it was already, there was a big Exposition Universelle in Paris, and it was starting to gather itself. By 1900, it was the, supreme.
So they were the center. Now Paris is the center, and
Paris is, and Americans, everybody, not just Americans, but a lot of Americans travelled there. I mean, sort of. It went from a very small number to a very large number of artists studying there.
From America, going to Paris to study.
Henry was one of the first, in there, and the man's nature. He was a libertarian. He mentioned spending a little time in cafes, but it was cafe society. I mean, he said he was too busy to spend too much time.
Right.
But he had the sort of explosive, wonderful, sort of free temperament to sort of certainly get into conversation. And the socialist ideals of the commune were still being hashed out in the cafes.
Right.
So he imbibed that spirit, from Paris, free thought, and came back and he taught in New York and many schools in New York.
I think his book was one of the I don't want to say famous, but one of the things that everybody had to read. Every artist had to read his book.
Yeah, and they still should.
It was a little book.
Yeah, it's a little. It's I think it was printed just after his death. But it's a marvelous book. It's called The Art Spirit, and honestly, it's just it's a remarkable. It's as fresh today for any artist, and it's memorable. I mean, there are quotes from him that turn up. My wife found a quote from him on a meditation website.
Really?
They are meditations. Some of his things, they're marvelous. And it's well worth a read. I think it was reprinted in paperback recently, but it's as valid then as it is now. He was a free thinker.
Right. So Robert Enright, he's in Paris and he's studying there, and he comes back.
Yeah, he to's and fro's all his life.
Okay.
Enright. He's to and fro's all his life.
Okay.
He took students there. And,
Yeah.
But he instilled the belief in free thought and expression in so many of his students. Hopper was one of his students, and his friend Chatterton, who was became the professor at Vassar.
Okay.
So, you know, it's got a bit of local sort of interest to it.
Right, right. And Hopper is the one that was in Rockland County, am I right?
Yeah, he lived in Nyack.
Right.
The Hopper House is in Nyack, and that's why the connection.
Right.
The other connection is that at this show, Hopper sold his first painting.
Okay.
And it's called Sailing.
So was it early in his career?
It was the first deal he sold, first painting he sold. You know, he must have been thrilled. He sold it to the Carnegie.
The Carnegie?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Nice sort of.
Yeah, no, it's very nice for your first sale.
Yeah, wonderful.
Wow.
And it's classic Hopper. It's not so quite as haunting of it, but it's got that loneliness. It's the lone sailor,
right?
But it's that framing he does, which is so revolutionary,
right.
And he simplifies it. You know, it's the first grains of modernisation. It's just simplifying the whole thing, and he's got that sort of framing that he does, which everybody loves about Hopper. I mean,
and I think it gives an idea of what the Americans were doing. They were doing everyday objects and scenes, everyday scenes.
American scene. Yeah, that was definitely starting. Henry was, he wanted. He wanted to paint the sort of frozen horse shit on. Yeah, I mean, he was a real gritty. Later on, they became known as the Ashcan School. But I mean, he was into real.
Who
life.
Gave him that name? Must have been a newspaper report.
It was another one of those famous derogatory sort of things because of the colour.
Stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so all this time is passing, and they're studying in Paris, and they decide they want New York to become more of a center. They probably had the same idea that the Parisians had. Let's bring it here.
Freedom. You know, they wanted freedom to.
But they wanted to show that art was not this art that was coming out of the academy.
Yeah, it wasn't stuffy. It was, and they wanted to show their own thing without being sort of censored, if you like.
So they had no idea that it was going to be a big deal.
They wanted it to be a big show. I mean, they really went all out, and A.B. Davies organised it.
I think I read that it was something like $5,000 to rent this armory.
It was a significant amount of money.
And that equates to about $150,000.
Yeah, and it was, and they knew that Davies had a lot of very serious clients, and he advised. I mean, I think he's going to go down in history. I mean, not only is he a good artist, or a great artist, but he was an extraordinary dealer. I mean, he put the Lily Bliss collection together, and I mean that formed part of the MoMA. You know, he really was a great dealer. He had a wonderful eye. He really
so not only an artist, you're saying Davies was an artist, but he's also
he's promoting advisor. You know, not so much dealer. He was an advisor, and he had a good eye. He did very, very well. He did
because I think the Metropolitan buys from this show.
MoMA
started.
Yeah, it's very in seeds of MoMA.
Okay.
Later on, they get it, but no, the Met buy. I mean, there's some very. A man called Quinn bought wonderfully well there, and unfortunately, his collection was dispersed really before everybody understood how good these things were.
Right.
But it was, it's the most important show. I mean, every one of those paintings is, very proudly displayed in top museums.
Oh, right, absolutely. And so, but then not only did they show, so they showed the Americans. Yeah. They showed international.
They showed Van Gogh, Munch. I mean, all the big.
But the history, they put Impressionists in also.
They had some Impressionists. They had some historic paintings to give a progression. Picasso was, shown extensively. He was the young hot rocket at the time. Right. Braque was shown. It was.
These are all Cubist paintings they're putting in, aren't they? Is it Cubist?
Yeah, they were Cubists. Yeah, the Duchamp nude descending a staircase is the famous image.
Well, I can't imagine what people thought when they saw that.
Well, because it was new. It was very different.
Right. But there were derogatory things that were said about it. It's like a shingled house.
The explosion in the shingles factory is the classic thing about it. I mean, it's people have had real trouble understanding what this meant. I mean, art and science is so close. I mean, Cubism is nothing apart from, different look on space and time, which was...
I think time is the important word. That's what was happening as she's coming down the staircase. Time is passing. That's the thing that I think of as Cubism.
Well, it's space and time.
Right.
I mean, that's it, and it's you know, it's got an awful similarity, the sort of, you know, space-time continuum of Einstein's new theory. I mean, you know, it's always interlinked.
That's true.
You
and
know.
did somebody buy that? Do you know? Did that sell?
Yeah, oh yeah, no, some guy heard the fora, picked up the phone and said, "I'll have it."
Oh,
you know,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, good move.
Good move, very good move.
You know,
and I think it's interesting in contrast to the thing that Robert Enright put into the show,
which was a full-size Academy, you know, with French style.
But he called it Figure in Motion.
Yeah, and it's very obviously, but it's more of a traditional.
Yes.
French Academy painting, but it's painted the way that Henry paints.
Do you think that the Americans were surprised at what people thought about the international artists?
Well, they were delighted for the publicity. I mean, the press was full of it for a month. You know, I mean,
even though it was derogatory, it was good publicity.
Yeah, I mean, there is no such thing as bad publicity. Okay. You know, I mean, it's you know, it got people through. And at least it exposed them to it, and that's really what's important, because it started the conversation.
Right.
You know, it really got people thinking. You know, even if they're laughing or scratching their heads, at least they're thinking.
Right.
Why is this weird, or what is this about? You know, that's the important thing.
Right.
You know, it's modernism was showing itself.
Right. And there were a lot of artists from Rockland County. From our area.
I mean, you can kind of track Davies's kind of toing and fromming from his home. I mean, Rockland Lake was a bit of a hotbed of artists, and believe it or not,
at that time, that's surprising.
Philosophical anarchists. And this guy, Davies was there, and a couple who he'd known from the Art Students League, a guy called John Frederick Mowbray Clark. Can't resist. He was a Brit. With a name like that, had to be.
Living here?
Living in Rockland Lake.
Okay.
And then later on in Pomona. But he was the VP and the vice president.
Of this eight?
Of the group who set up the Armory.
Okay.
And he was a quiet man, always in the background, but he was instrumental in organising it with Davies. So that's very much Rockland Lake, Rockland County. Okay. So Hopper, you know, Nyack, hop down the road, excuse the pun. And then, you know, people from New Jersey, Van Deering Perrine from New Jersey, he was involved. I mean, there were a lot of, and then a lot of New Yorkers. But there was this hub of sort of Rockland County interest, which, you know, it's my pet thing.
Right. So that's why the Montclair Museum is.
No, I mean, the Montclair doing a marvelous show. You know, they're going to the trouble of recreating the sort of feeling of it. You know, the interior of it.
What about the interior of it? Because it was very different. They had the big room, the drill hall.
Yeah, it was huge. And it was all set up, you know, in various areas, and you know, there was a sort of plan that people would walk through and see the progression. You know, they had to go in this way and that way. There's this marvelous website, but on Virginia EDU of University of Virginia.
Is it University of Virginia?
I think Virginia EDU.
I think you can just go on the internet and type in Armory Show 1913.
Yeah, and it comes. It's you can kind of go in, and it's sort of, you can go into all the different.
It was sort of set up almost like the Metropolitan, all little rooms around the side. It was set up by artists in order to show. I mean, and it put together very fast, so they did a pretty good job. Yeah.
And it, you know, at the end of the day, we're all thrilled that it showed so well.
Right.
But it's
so now the Rockland Montclair Art Museum is doing something.
Yeah, they're doing a show, and that opens the 17th, which is the official day that it did open.
17th
of February.
Oh,
right.
Oh, I thought was it a February show, or I thought it was October.
No. No, the New York Historical Society are opening a celebration of it in October in New York City.
Okay, but the original show in 1913
opened February 17th, right?
Oh, interesting.
I'm talking at the Hopper House on the 15th.
Okay.
Which was the planned opening date, the originally planned opening.
And they had to push it back?
They had to push it back,
Push it ahead, I should say,
yeah,
2 days.
Push it.
And you're giving a talk about the...
Yeah, just really about the Rockland County kind of spin on it, because it's not so well known, and it kind of gets forgotten about, and I think it's important, and I'll just try and position the show.
Yeah. You think it was the show of the century because everything changed after it?
Yeah, it really was, and you know, it's known as the Armory Show, right? There's lots of Armory shows. You know, there's a couple of
there's a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, even the Winter Antique Show is known. Oh, it's the Armory Show, the Winter Armory Show. Right. It had such an impact. I mean, it's quite remarkable that it had such.
It changed artists. It changed the public.
It changed the public's view of modern art. I mean, maybe it reinforced their view that they're all mad. But
I think wasn't it even Teddy Roosevelt that got involved and said something about their...
Yeah, he preferred his Navajo rugs. You know, that was his
he
quote.
Preferred his Navajo rugs. That's so funny. Yeah. But I thought he said something like, it's okay if you believe that there are a bunch of lunatics or something painted.
Yeah, I think in the end I think he had to sort of.
But then on his walls he had all animals hanging. So I don't know. Yeah. That's another whole story. But
no, I mean, it got amazing publicity, and it was, you know, it made people think.
Right.
You know, it made people reflect upon it, and it ushered in new ways of looking at things. You know, taking out.
Well, did it take away that authority of the Academy so that people could say, I don't have to buy that. I can be freer in my choices, I wonder.
I think the purchases made by, you know, well-versed avant-garde collectors were important. I mean, it was the kind of rearing the heads of these, you know, well-informed, you know, rugged individual collectors that sort of breached boundaries by buying these, you know, and there were some very well-to-do people. I mean, it was, you know, shocking in real time. So some of their purchases were, you know, considered, you know.
Do you think they bought it with the idea that it was going to go into a museum and this would be the start of something big, or they just were being...
They were being advised, they were learning, it was part of the sort of growing internationalism. I mean, the Americans were showing, you know, they were quite comparative, you know, they had the opportunity to compare. And, you know, it kind of, the old look on the show was that, the poor Americans were overshadowed by the internationals and this, that, and the other. I think that's going to change. I think with a new review of it, we're going to look more at the Americans. You know, the Americans were actually quite a lot more expensive than Europeans to a certain point. So we're going to have another sort of look at the Armory Show, which will be really, you know, interesting and exciting.
That's really interesting. So the Americans were more expensive.
No, they were.
I wonder if that was part of the decision of what to buy. Come on.
Well, yeah. Well, it was, you know, I think, you know, some of the frock coat mafia didn't really want to see their position.
Yeah.
Sort of, you know, I mean, they'd set the bar. Right. You know.
But it took many years, I think, for America to be the center of art, which did happen eventually. I think,
I think, you know, it was. Sad to say, I think it was the Second World War.
A lot of Europeans
came here. I mean, there were flood, and then they were all sent packing by the American, you know, abstract expressionists. You know, the interest in that. They were kind of.
But do you think that artists now changed much then, and after this show? Because that's what art is all about. You're looking at what came before and learning from it and taking it and changing it and putting it in, isn't it? Don't you think?
I think it helped America in its, you know, in its quest to be free to be you and me.
Yeah, okay.
You know, I mean, the freedom of expression became more acceptable, and that, you know, goes through into society.
Right.
You know, I mean, modernists are they're not just artists or architects. They're thinkers and people, and, you know, it affects people, how people's morality, you know, I mean, it really does affect the fabric of society.
Right. Just define when you say modernists, because I think people think modern means contemporary, but you're not saying it that way.
A modernist is somebody who's free to think different.
Okay, but modern art is a period of time.
Yeah, modern art is, I mean, it's the period from the Armory Show.
Right, exactly, right. And then it changes, but you wouldn't call abstract expressionist modern art anymore, would you?
It creeps forward through. I mean, yeah, I think you would call.
You would? Really?
I would.
You
yeah,
would?
I would. Yeah.
When did you stop saying art was modern
well,
art?
I'm terribly fuddy-duddy about sort of 1960. But I'm a bit of a historian.
Right. So you won't go past 1960.
Oh, that's just my limitation.
Okay. All right. So you feel that up to 1960 we would still call it modern art.
Yeah, Museum of Modern Art.
But they even had in their bylaws that at a certain point they had to sell the work, which was no longer.
No, that it kind of was supposed to move to the Met.
Right.
And
but they've changed that.
Well, yeah, wouldn't you?
You're not going to let all that good work go anymore, right? Yeah, right.
Kiss your Monet goodbye.
So it's. I think it's confusing modern versus contemporary. But, I mean, you
contemporary
could say,
means that, alive now, being done now, it's current.
Right. And it does not necessarily have to be modern art that's being done now.
No. I mean, they're still great impressionists.
Right. Yeah. So
it's but it is just the way it's the modern. It was modernists, thoroughly modern Millie and all that.
Right.
It's that, but it's really the freedom of thought.
Okay.
That
you feel that this 1913 show did that.
I really do, and that's why it's important.
It's
really loosened things up.
Okay.
Shook them hard. And that's why it's.
And on that thought, we'll close this show. We're shaking it up. Let's just review a little bit. Montclair Art Museum.
Yeah.
The Hopper House you're doing on the 15th.
The 15th is a small talk.
At what time?
7 o'clock.
Okay.
25 hard chairs.
Okay. So you have to make reservations to go
Yes,
there.
please make reservations.
Okay.
And then later on, the New York Historical Society, which is just, I don't know if you've seen it, it's beautifully been refinished. It's magnificent.
Oh, it's fabulous.
It's fabulous.
Yeah.
It's just marvelous. And they are doing a show, and Kimberly Orcott is the curator, one of the curators, and she's the lady who did the show at the Bruce as the Chase and Henry. So she's really.
Is that there now? Chase?
No, it was there a few years ago, but it was a great show. But yeah, those are the shows, and then there's.
And then of course your gallery. Are you going to show?
There's a little kind of before and after. I mean, I don't have a large collection of paintings from the Armory, but we've got a few.
But you do have some.
Yeah. But we'll do a little sort of before and after.
Okay.
But what comes after?
It sounds fabulous.
Yeah. No, it's going to be an exciting year, and it'll be staggered. So people who get interested can go to all the events, and there's been press about it in the Times and the New Criterion.
Yes. You can look on the websites and see it. And
it's really worth doing. And there was a retrospective show 50 years ago.
Okay.
The Hirschhorn did, helped organise it. That was the great book. But it's going to be a big push.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming and talking about it. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Bichichi. Thank you.
And thank you for watching.